Thank you very much, Mr. Jardine. Good morning and good afternoon, distinguished guests and panelists and partners from the media. Let me, in the time allocated to me, which seems to be quite a bit of time for welcoming remarks, extend greetings from the pavilion of South Africa at Expo 2020. Special greetings from the Consul General and his staff at our office in Dubai, as well as greetings from myself and the office in Abu Dhabi. And obviously, one cannot forget the awesome DTIC Project Expo team stationed at the pavilion and the wonderful work they have been doing and they are doing for running our pavilion and setting up an event like this. Thank you very much, colleagues. South Africa continues with its commitment to creating an enabling environment for investment and trade. Our country is currently navigating the impact of COVID-19 on the economy and making efforts to accelerate economic recovery, consolidate reform, and review policies to improve the investment environment. South Africa offers investors the stability of a developed country along with the lucrative opportunities of a very vibrant emerging market. Today's Think Opportunity, Think South Africa session will focus on a sector where South Africa has significant strengths and where the Gulf region as a market offers significant opportunity. Our focus today is on unlocking the agriculture value chain, agribusiness, as one of the focus sectors in the South African economy, and a sector our government has deemed a focus area for growth and development. The country enjoys a well-developed and globally competitive sector, which has led to the creation of a sophisticated and elaborate value chain ranging from agricultural inputs, equipment, packaging, and specialized logistics. This sector provides the opportunity for both local and export markets and is a contributor to our job creation drive. Agribusiness growth can contribute strongly to poverty reduction and job creation, mainly because of its demand linkages and because agribusiness and related activities tend to be more labor intensive and less import intensive. A sophisticated and competitive agro-processing industry is built and supported by South Africa's diverse agricultural sector, accounting for almost 23% of the country's manufacturing sector and making it the largest subsector of manufacturing. The food and beverages sector was one of the best performing manufacturing subsectors in the last 5 years, growing from 392 billion rand in 2014 to over 530 billion in 2018. The rapid growth of the African continent in addition and its population and increase in middle-class earnings per capita has seen an increase in investments by international agribusiness companies in the continent. Most companies are accelerating their growth in key markets around the world, and South Africa still remains the destination of choice for most companies. Our participation at Expo 2020 reinforces our mission that South Africa is an attractive destination for foreign direct investment. We have 644 billion in current investment, and hopefully the Expo 2020 in Dubai is forecasted to grow that figure exponentially. Our participation at Expo 2020 is expected to attract about 190 countries who are here already. This presents us with an opportunity to position our country as open for business, is an opportunity for the country also to highlight its competitive strengths to possible partners. We therefore welcome all of you to this day focused on one of the most important sectors in the country, and hope that the discussions today will widen our perspective of what opportunities this sector holds for our investors. With these few words, it is a special honor, a singular honor, for me to introduce our keynote speaker for the day. We are honored to have with us today the Honorable Minister, Thoko Didiza, who heads up the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. Minister does not need to be introduced to South Africans, and hopefully after this won't have to be introduced to the world, because she has a wealth of experience in agriculture, having served as the first woman Minister of Agriculture in our new democracy. Minister Didiza has an extensive portfolio, which ranges from spatial development planning and land use management to market access and exports to the development of agri-parks and agriculture master plans. She is passionate about supporting women in agriculture and promoting the role of women in food systems. She has also been recently elected as the chairperson of the African Union Ministerial Specialized Technical Committee on Agriculture, Rural Development, Water and Environment. Thank you very, very much, Minister, for being part of this. And we promise you that at Expo, we will carry out whatever needs to put our agricultural sector firmly in focus. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our Ambassador, for that introduction. I'd like to recognize the program moderator, Mr. Roger George, President Business Associations, Captains of Industry present, members of the diplomatic community, ladies and gentlemen. I extend proudly South Africa's greetings to all of you. Distinguished guests, I have the privilege to welcome you to this prestigious event as we launch the South African Week on Agriculture and Agribusiness, an event which will showcase our agricultural heritage, its fresh and processed value chains. The Dubai Expo is one of the most outstanding global showcase events. I can present on this platform with pride on what South Africa's agricultural and food sectors can offer the world. South Africa is the most diversified economy on the African continent, with close proximity to the Middle East. This close proximity makes efficient value chains and better integration of economies so much more viable in providing goods efficiently and on time. Dubai and the broader Middle East regions have valuable middle and high income consumers and sophisticated retail chains that has high demands on quality, food safety, and reliability of value chains. And I'm sure those of you who have visited the stand might have already seen some of these nice food products that we have to offer. It is also attributed that South African agricultural business have and are able to provide with excellence. The fresh produce and nuts value chain alone supply produce to over 120 markets around the globe, including some of the most sophisticated and demanding markets in terms of food safety and quality control standards, such as the Middle East, where we are today, the European market, the United States, Japan, and China. Supplies of productive diversity and price and quality competitive produce all year around is also what is most to retailers that need to bring the best quality into the reach of their consumers. The interdependencies on trade and investment with Dubai and the region is of high value to the growth and prosperity of our economies. Some of our most sophisticated value chains are present today to participate, to showcase and deliberate our role in supply global consumers in efficient ways. South Africa has one of the oldest and most advanced supply and value chains on the continent for sugar, fruits, nuts, beverages, animal feed, processed and canned products, to mention but a few. Especially innovative poultry meat products have recently attracted interest from the demand in the Middle Eastern countries. Participation in Expo2020 inspires collaboration between government and the private sector and international role players to make South Africa and the world a better place. We came to this expo to foster mutual economic growth, opportunities, and advancement of our economies. For post-COVID-19 recovery, South Africa is also embarked on additional measures for a reconstruction and recovery development to stimulate our economy, which includes agriculture. The Expo 2020 aligns with important government initiatives to attract foreign investment, to showcase the sector's capabilities, and provide the necessary profile for economic diplomacy to promote the initiatives that may follow as a result of this event today, and actually this week and the months to come. The Department of Trade, Industries and Competition is one of special importance in delivering for the agricultural and food sector as the only national agency for industrial development and export promotion on behalf of the agricultural and food sectors. In this respect, my department, the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, work closely together to deliver on issues that require the performance of the sector, such as the regulatory requirements for foreign export, particularly on issues of phytosanitary and sanitary measures, as well as resolving land reform issues which require investment in the country for increasing our production. It is important to note that the dynamics are changing fast, and as the African Continental Free Trade Area agreements take shape among its 54 member countries, the continent will arise with opportunity, higher levels of investment and collaboration, which I'm sure will be of interest to a number of players here today. The continent will become a new frontier for the supply of food around the globe. Many of the systems, know-how, and distribution networks are located in South Africa. In this regard, we're thankful to our valuable and central role we play in the development of the African continent. We should also recognize the many small and emerging agri-businesses in South Africa which are eager to supply the global market. Not only do they supply jobs in rural areas, but good and fair labor practices that resonate with modern consumers that want to contribute to the upliftment of communities through fair trade. Without compromising on food safety and standards, I believe that the sector can progress in terms of providing the necessary infrastructure in terms of abattoirs and processing facilities in order that an increased number of small producers can benefit from providing high quality, affordable food on the tables of consumers around the world. Branding can go a long way in expressing where food comes from and how they connect to community upliftment. Such close partnerships between international communities brought about by markets and the retail industry can do so much more to a sustainable global landscape of peace and prosperity. Today's event, with both virtual and physical showcasing of South Africa's agricultural and food sector's capabilities, is an attempt to further inspire and foster close partnerships for greater integration, investment, and opportunities for all. We would like to present South Africa as the trade and investment destination of choice on the continent, to showcase our available proposition, highlight investment opportunity, and foster closer collaboration and business networks. South Africa and the agricultural sector are committed to create an enabling environment for investment and trade. Post-COVID-19 recovery requires more innovative collaborative partnerships and initiatives that put our economies on a growth trajectory. The growth forecast for South Africa has already been revised upwardly, projected by the International Monetary Fund from 4% to 5%. Even during the global pandemic, the South African agriculture and food sector has shown remarkable resilience, and export grew actually by double digits year on year. South Africa still has good infrastructure and regulatory framework that provide a safe haven for right type of investments to expand. Even though we recognize that infrastructure capacities are stretched to the brink, we must recognize that South Africa has both elements of a highly advanced economy and a strong emerging market and emerging investment climate. There is still substantial room for growth. The diversity of the economy and a well-developed services sector make the South African agricultural sector a bankable proposition for even larger investments on the continent, especially with its leading role in the continent and within the context of further integration on the African continent. This is a country for investors to look at. With the fast rate of global urbanization, the supply chains for fresh produce has an increasingly important role to play in global food security and in healthy living. The global availability of accessible water infrastructure for farming lags behind globally as population pressures build and demand for food increase. At the same time, consumers globally require safe and nutritious food, even though distant from sources of production. The South African agricultural industry, and in specifically the department, assures quality through its subsidiaries such as the Perishable Products Export Control Board, commonly known as PPECB, to be among other measures based on a nationally quality control system that ensures safe fresh products which adhere to international best practices. Fresh produce is important for a healthy and nutritional diet. We've seen it in this pandemic that healthy living and natural immunity is important. South Africa has consistently over many decades been a world leader of fresh produce supply in a highly competitive world market. The South African agricultural sector provides efficient products through its supply chains from farm to fork to hundreds of countries around the world. The department, therefore, is key to sustaining and improving on safe and nutritious global food supply and value chains. Sustainability of our production systems are important through environmental protection and restoration. Agro-industries play an important role in retaining the nutritional and shelf life of food in value addition that meets the needs of consumers for nutritious and convenient food through product innovation. In this manner, the South African agro-processing provides the solutions for modern day consumers' needs to provide food that is available, accessible, and affordable. Food security is important globally. While sustainable and expanding business provides the countries with valuable foreign exchange and jobs, government, through its support services in our country, contributes to the economy through the application of technology to sustain the integrity of the food systems and food safety. I would like to thank everyone for listening and hope that our contact in this manner provides some openness for future interactions. What transpires from Dubai Expo could be an important spark in a new food systems revolution in the way we do business and partner. I wish you all a very exciting Dubai Expo, particularly this week of agriculture, so that you can enjoy and actually look forward to even more agricultural products in the future. Thank you very much to you all.
Thank you, Minister, and good morning and welcome participants and delegates. My name is Roger George and I'm the moderator for the Agri-Business session this morning. I'd firstly like to thank the Minister for her comprehensive keynote address. Agriculture, I think as we know it, is a key cornerstone of the South African economy, and it was actually inspiring to hear you speak, Minister, of the opportunities in the agriculture and food industries in South Africa. And in fact, you touched on a number of topics that we're going to be talking about today, particularly driven by the needs of consumers, health and wellness, et cetera, et cetera. So I think before we start the session, I'd like to give you an overview of what the session is going to look like. We're going to continue the session, I think, beginning with a presentation of the overview of the South African agricultural sector. That's going to be done by Dr. Tempia from the Markets and Research Team of the National Agricultural Marketing Council. We're then going to enter into a series of panel discussions addressing a number of key topics across the agriculture and food sector. And the first discussion is going to be on the South African Sugarcane Value Chain Master Plan. And that discussion is going to be led by Judith Wilson, who's the Commercial Director of the South African Sugar Association. We're then going to get an overview of the South African poultry industry and that's going to be led by Mr. Isak Breitenbach, who's the General Manager of the South African Poultry Association. We're then going to switch tack a bit, and I think start looking at some of the industry trade and export councils, and in particular, we're going to be focusing on Fruit South Africa, and the Chief Executive of Fruit South Africa, Ms. Fumalani Rachitanga, will have a discussion with me around that. We're then going to switch tack once again, and we're going to talk about what is it like investing in South Africa, and we're going to discuss an investing experience by PepsiCo, and that discussion is going to be led by Bridget Brackman, who's the Vice President of PepsiCo Sub-Saharan Africa. And I think lastly, but not leastly, and touching on some of the minister's remarks, we're going to be talking about food safety, food quality, and food waste. And that discussion is going to be led by Ms. Matlaw Satati, who's the executive of the Food Safety Initiative in the Consumer Goods Council in South Africa. So I think without further ado, let us move on in the very exciting program we've got together. I'd like to introduce Dr. Tempia from the National Agriculture Marketing Council to give us an overview of the South African agricultural sector. Dr. Tempia, over to you. Dr. Tempia, are you there?
Thank you. Let me just flag my presentation.
Welcome.
It actually says it has been disabled. I cannot share my screen.
Okay, Dr. Tempia, I'll give you sharing rights.
I beg your pardon?
I will allow you to share. Let me just have a look.
Okay, all right.
Thanks, Johnny.
Sure.
You can share now, Dr. Tempia.
Okay, I'm gonna do that. Okay.
We can see your screen now. Thank you.
Program Director, Honorable Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, Ms. Thoko Didiza, ministers from partnering countries, members of diplomatic corridors, distinguished guests. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me a great pleasure to be representing South Africa on this very special occasion. I will be presenting I'll be giving an overview of the South African agricultural sector, as well as presenting some potential investment opportunities that exist between South Africa and the United Arab Emirates. My presentation, colleagues and everybody on call, is outlined as follows. I will be giving an overview of the department, which it's hosted by the minister here, and our relationship as the NMC to the department. Then I'll go over to the overview of the South African agricultural sector. Then I will also look into the bilateral trade between South Africa and the United Arab Emirates, as well as potential trade opportunities between the United Arab Emirates and South Africa. And then I'll give my concluding remarks. In terms of the relationship between the department and the NMC, National Agricultural Marketing Council is a statutory advisory body to the Minister of Agriculture, Ms. Thoko Didiza, and the disadvantaged groups. NMC was established in terms of MAP Act of 1996 and executes its mandate in line with the 4 objectives of the MAP Act. I will touch on the objectives of the MAP Act in the next slide. The vision for the NMC is basically to strategically position the agricultural sector in a dynamic global market. Our mission, the reasons for our existence as the organization, is to provide agricultural marketing advisory services to key stakeholders in support of vibrant agricultural marketing system in South Africa. The MAP Act objectives that I was referring to in the previous slide are basically to increase market access for all market participants, promoting the efficiency of marketing of agricultural products, optimization of export earnings from agricultural products, as well as enhancing the viability of the agricultural sector. NMC has 4 core divisions. I will not get into that as that will take quite an amount of my time and I would prefer to just go straight into the main core of the presentation. So those 4 divisions are agribusiness development, agricultural trust, markets and economic research center, and statutory measures. In terms of the overview of the South African agricultural sector, South African agricultural sector is a dualistic kind of nature made up of commercial and smallholder farmers. It is important to note that this sector plays a huge role towards employment creation. And this is taking place even amidst high unemployment rates in the country. It's also important to note that agricultural sector continues to employ more people. And this has also proven to be a sector that remained resilient even during the COVID-19, as indicated by the increase in the employment sector on a year-on-year basis and quarter-to-quarter basis. This sector also continues to employ a number of men and women in the sector. Based on Q2 figures, the number of men and women actively involved in the agricultural sector were 610,000 and 252,000 for men and women respectively. It is also important to just note that this sector continues to, it remains at primary, most of the production remains at primary level of the value chain. And I believe that this opportunity of Dubai Expo presents an opportunity where South Africa and United Arab Emirates can cooperate to ensure that we forge on initiatives that promote agro-processing and value addition, especially for smallholder farmers. Further to this, agricultural sector has 3 subsectors: horticulture, animal production, and field crops. Animal production constitutes 50% constitutes 50%, followed by horticulture and field crops. These subsectors play a very important role towards the gross value addition of the South African agricultural production. And in terms of animal production subsector, poultry remains one of the leading commodity, followed by cattle, sheep, and pig. In terms of horticulture, citrus, deciduous fruits, vegetables, viticulture, and nuts are some of the leading commodities. When it comes to field crops, maize, sugar, soybeans, wheat, and hay remain some of the leading commodities in this subsector. South Africa has some top agricultural commodities that we export to the world, and the first one being citrus, fresh citrus, followed by wine, corn and corn products, seafood, and fresh grapes. And some of our top South Africa export destination markets are the Netherlands, United Kingdom, China, Botswana, Namibia, Mozambique, and United States of America. Of course, this exposition helps us to understand that the United Arab Emirates also has the potential to be one of our export destination markets. Furthermore, this graph basically shows how the South African trade, agricultural trade, has been performing from between the period 2011 and 2020. As you can see from the graph, South Africa exports to the world have been increasing during this period of analysis. Some of the top exported agricultural products are edible fruits and nuts, beverages, meat, edible meat, oilseeds, and cereals. Maybe just zeroing down to the agricultural trade between South Africa and the United Arab Emirates bilateral trade. South African government is committed to strengthening the bilateral economic relations with the United Arab Emirates. Some bilateral relations between South Africa and United Emirates were initiated in 1992 through organized exhibition of South African products. And of course, the aim of these relation is to promote South African value-added goods in the sector where higher export earnings can be realized, as well as the development of export markets for locally manufactured products and services, as well as recruiting new foreign direct investment into the country. As indicated by the previous speaker, agricultural sector remained the central sector to fostering economic growth, reducing poverty, and improving food security in the country. So it is important to note that the United Arab Emirates remains one of the strategic trading hubs for South African agricultural products, as well as agro-processing. Just to zero on some figures, which basically shows that indeed South Africa and United Arab Emirates need each other. We are not sufficient in what we produce. We do export and we do imports. So based on the 2020 figures, South Africa exported about 11 million USA dollars worth of agricultural products to the global markets, and about exports to the UAE constituted about 3%. South Africa also imported a total value of about 6 million USA dollars from the world, and the imports from the UAE constituted about 0.6%. On the other hand, United Arab Emirates exported about 14 million USA dollars worth of agricultural products to the world, and South African constituted about 0.3% of those agricultural products to the UAE. And UAE imported about the total value of 20 million USA dollars from the world, and South Africa constituted about 1.6% share of these agricultural imports. This basically shows, as I said, that there exists some potential between South Africa and the United Arab Emirates in terms of trading with each other, as we are not self-sufficient in what we produce. This also basically shows some of the South African total agricultural exports based on 2020 figures. South Africa is exporting a lot of oranges, followed by table grapes and other products, as you can see on the graph. And then, of course, UAE total agricultural imports composed of rice and other products that I will not get into details because of the time allocated to me. So in terms of potential trade opportunities between United Arab Emirates and South Africa, based on the export realistic opportunities that we have conducted as the NMC, these are some of the products that exist and that actually present some trade opportunities between the United Arab Emirates and South Africa. The first one being forage products, lucerne, meals and pellets, followed by fruits and vegetable and so forth. In the concluding remarks, I'm going to give this in terms of the value of export that can be realized if such were to be followed. Based on the analysis, above analysis, the realistic potential investment opportunities exist between South Africa and the United Arab Emirates in the following prioritized industry. The first one being animal feed formulation and lucerne. This is valued at about 893 million in the United Arab Emirates markets. This is also followed by fruits and nuts, which presents futuristic, realistic potential for South Africa, which is over 500 million rands. And then this is also followed by vegetable industry, which is one of the strategic industry due to its South Africa proximity in terms of logistics and keeping the cold chain estimated, which is estimated at the trade potential of the value of 300 million rand. We also have teas and herbs, which exhibit a potential export values of about 85 million rand. Poultry is also one of the sector or industry that presents good opportunities. This is estimated at the export value of about 75 million, and it is much larger if Saudi Arabia were to be considered. We also have processed fruits and vegetable, in this case, canned and frozen, with the export potential value at 52 million. We also have dried legumes with export potential of about 52 million, and beans is one of the popular food ingredients in the Middle East and Asia. So that's a great opportunity where we can cooperate in terms of trade relations. We also have cut flowers with the export potential worth 51 million rands. We also have dairy products with the potential exports valued at 50 million rands. And of course, on top of this, the Agricultural and Agro-Processing Master Plan offers an opportunity for sectoral players to form meaningful private-public partnership with clear commitments and targets to grow the sector on inclusive basis, and of course, to work towards job creation, economic growth, and food security. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Dr. Tempia. That was really interesting. Quite exciting to see the growth opportunities that exist in the industry, and interesting that you touched on two of the sectors that we're going to be talking about much more today, which will be around poultry and fruit, which are some of the biggest contributors. So thanks very much for that, and also your concluding remarks around the specific opportunities that exist. I think I'd like to move into our next session and call upon our next speaker, Ms. Judith Wilson, who's the Commercial Director of the South African Sugar Association, to talk to us about the South Africa Sugarcane Value Chain Master Plan. Hi, Judith. Welcome to the session. I think you're firstly going to just give us a quick overview of the sugar plan, right? And then we're going to take some questions. Is that right?
That's correct, Roger. Thanks.
Perfect.
I'm just sharing my screen. Can you see that?
Yeah, we can. Just put it in presentation mode. Thanks.
Doing that now. All good?
Yep.
Is that better?
It's still showing two pieces, Judith. So yeah, there we go. Perfect.
Is that okay? Superb.
Perfect.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. And Ambassador, thank you for the lovely introduction. And Program Director George, thanks very much for everything you've done today as well. I think a special hello from me to Minister Thoko Didiza. I'm sure she shares the pride that many of us will be sharing today in seeing so many women represented in terms of representing agriculture in South Africa. Certainly a drive that the Minister has made public, and we are glad to be here doing that with her. I'd like to talk today about something that has been very exciting for the South African sugar industry, which is the Sugarcane Value Chain Master Plan. I'm going to very quickly introduce the sugar industry in South Africa, which is essentially governed by legislation, as many industries or sugar industries globally are, because of the very close relationship that needs to exist between the growers of sugar and the millers of sugar. So in our case, we grow sugarcane, and that's milled by sugar millers. We have over 21,000 growers of sugar in South Africa, the majority of which, over 20,000, would be considered small-scale growers. And these are largely in rural areas. So sugarcane growing is incredibly important to South Africa from a rural economic perspective. We have 12 operating sugar mills that are milling the sugar that is grown by these cane growers. And these are positioned right down the coast of South Africa, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal. And this is right down the east coast of South Africa and up towards the Kruger National Park. For those of you in the UAE that might have visited this part of the world, in Mpumalanga. And it's a very important economic contributor to South Africa. We estimate that about 1 million livelihoods are dependent on the sugar industry. There's direct employment of 65,000 people. And when you looked earlier at Dr. Tempia's numbers in terms of employment, in terms of agriculture, you can see that the sugar industry is quite a significant player in that regard. We do focus our energies on selling sugar in the local market, which is where it is possible for returns to be made. And we do export sugar because structurally we are structured in such a way that we produce more sugar than can be consumed in our home market. I think the really important thing in the origin of the Sugarcane Value Chain Master Plan was the fact that the sugar industry is designed in such a way, and has been for decades, that it encourages rural development of sugarcane and then milling of sugarcane into making sugar. And essentially what has happened is that we've encouraged an industry, because of the economic benefits, that produces more sugar than can be consumed in South Africa. And over time, and this is a picture of the last 10 years going up to 1920. So our sugar years are from April until March of the following year. And we're looking at a 10-year period here of sugarcane production. So the entire bar that you will see is the full production in a year. And so, for example, in 2009, 2010, we produced about 2.2 million tons of sugar. And of that, about 1.4 million tons was sold in the local market. So the silvery gold bars are good. Those are tons of sugar that we sell that are beneficial to those that produce them and are actually producing some return. Those that are blue are exported sales. And unfortunately, in the case of sugar, as is the case right around the world, sugar exports are sold at a loss. The sugar world is structurally in a deficit. It's a structurally oversupplied market globally. And so any sugar that is exported typically is exported below the country's cost of production, even for huge producers like Brazil. Interestingly enough, the UAE is the home of the largest port-based refinery in the world, Al-Khalij refinery, and much of the sugar in the world is actually sent to that refinery for refining and then sending around the region. It's a very bold and prosperous initiative that was put together by Al-Khalij. But essentially what's happened over 10 years is the South African sugar industry has been plagued by a number of problems. In the sort of 2011-2012 period, we went through quite a severe drought, which reduced our total production. And you'll see the black line shows the number of registered growers in the industry. That dropped off dramatically in that time as people went out of business. Then as the crop started increasing again in 2013, 2014, so we were hit by a flood of imports because of some challenges with import duties and the world price of sugar dropping so low that it made it possible for about 500,000 tons of sugar to be landed in South Africa almost without paying a duty. Then as we started recovering from that shock, we went into another drought, which again caused a drop in the number of growers and the reduction in the economic activity within the sugar industry. And then following that again, a few years later, we were plagued with imports. And a little after that, we also went into a process with our government of a health promotion levy, which was levied on sugar-sweetened beverages. And this was put together as a health promotion process, which was to try and encourage people to drink less sugar-sweetened beverages. But of course, for people that produce sugar, this had a massive impact in terms of the ability of the South African sugar producers to sell sugar in South Africa. Much more sugar was exported at a loss, and rather a large number of jobs were lost in that process as less sugar was being used locally. And fortunately, our government recognized this. And Honourable Minister Thoko Didiza, as well as Minister Ibrahim Patel of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, got together and set up the Sugarcane Value Chain Master Plan to 2030, which recognizes the fact that this industry is pivotal to economic development, particularly in the rural economies, that agriculture in terms of sugarcane is really important to the country, but that we have a situation where we are going to fall into decline unless there is a coordinated effort by the public sector and by government to sustain and grow this industry until it can become a really significant economic contributor as it used to be. There was a journey that was followed in order to get to the master plan. And we were very fortunate in the fact that as we were going through part of our deepest, darkest times in terms of unsustainability and the sugar industry really getting to the point where it almost fell apart, that President Ramaphosa announced the plan to start this master plan sector approach. And I think what's so important about it is master plans are intended to bring together not only the industry involved, but their entire value chain. Not only the entire value chain, but also all of the partners who have an influence on that value chain, namely government, as well as workers' trade unions. So it's an incredibly important idea because what it does essentially is it does a massive business plan for an industry with all of the people that are involved, making contributions, giving their opinion, giving their support, and then creating an industry that ultimately comes beneficial for all as we come out of the process. So in terms of the master plan we're working on currently, we're at about month 18 in the master plan. So we're in our first 3 years. It's a long process, and the first phase is a 3-year process. We're at month 18 of that now. And essentially what the stakeholders in the master plan have done is they've made a set of commitments. So they've said we want to try and restore sales of sugar in the local market as much as possible. So less importing and more use of local sugar locally. And we also want to ensure that prices are restrained so that consumers benefit from this process. So there must be a way in which the consumer is also protected in the process. We need to ensure that there's trade protection and job retention, which is critical because we'd lost so many jobs in this process. We also need to ensure that small-scale growers, which are largely in our rural areas, these can be people who have 1.5 hectares of sugarcane that is part of what sustains their family's livelihood. And these are incredibly important units because in many cases, these small-scale growers sustain a significantly large number of people within their community based partly on what they produce from sugarcane. We also agreed with our ministers that transformation in this industry was critical. In South Africa, the imperative to transform the previously very white-held wealth in the country to a far more sustained and transformed situation is incredibly important, and it's a big part of our master plan. And then importantly, we said, let's look at how we can restructure our industry. So we all get together, look with our government at what would be best to do to restructure our industry. And to do this, they set up a set of task teams. There are 10 of them. And these task teams work together, and each task team is composed only of people who really have a particular interest in that particular area. So for example, on task team 6 is sugarcane-based value chain diversification strategy. This is a particular task team that's looking at what could we make from sugarcane that is not sugar. So could we, for example, make jet fuel? Could we, for example, make plastic? And those are the areas where investment and opportunities to grow the activity of this industry into diversified areas become so exciting. As the minister said, diversification away from primary agriculture has got to be one of our top priorities going forward as a country. So it's a very exciting process we're in now, and we are very excited that we are starting to see some real tangible results. Just to give you a quick look at the stakeholders of the master plan, there are others that are joining. So we do have other stakeholders within South Africa that are joining the master plan. But critical here are the fact that we have our government partners right throughout who have been very vocal and demonstrative in terms of their support of the master plan, particularly Minister Didiza and Minister Patel. And then we have partners within the sugar value chain, so people that grow cane and people that mill sugar. And then we have the people that buy sugar downstream, as well as the worker unions. It's an incredibly important social compact that thus far is working very well, and we really hope is going to continue yielding fruit for the sugar industry. And just a brief look at early success in the master plan. One of our key objectives was, I showed you earlier how the local market sales had been dwindling down. And in the first year of the master plan, through the commitments of the master plan, we were able to increase our total sales of South African sugar within South Africa by 14%. This is critically important because this is really the bedrock of where our sustainability comes from, is local sales of the local market. We do sell sugar on the export market, and we have in fact sold sugar to Dubai on several occasions. And we try to find markets where there is some preference or some sort of quota arrangement where our prices will be much higher. We are very, very proud of our quota arrangement into the US as well as the UK and the EU. And these are markets that we try to target because the prices we can achieve for export sugar are not as good as the local market, but certainly much better than the rest of the world market can be achieved. But certainly from a master plan perspective, we've been very encouraged by the start of this process. It's early days. There's a long way to go. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of diversifying away from table sugar into other products that can be made from cane or from sugar for that matter. And we are very positive about the future for the sugar industry on the basis of the stakeholder compact that has been struck with support from our government. And Roger, thanks. I think that's me done.
Thanks, Judith. That was really, really exciting. I mean, it's so interesting to see, I love it when a plan comes together, as they say in the movies, right? And good to see the progress that you've made. Interesting, that you were talking around, one of the work streams looking at alternative products as an example to perhaps, not only grow the sugar from the industry, but also the products. So in terms of the existing industry capabilities, do you see any opportunities for investment and partnerships in the sugar industry in South Africa?
Certainly. I think that what we see happening at the moment as part of the master plan is this particular working group that's looking at diversification is doing a number of feasibility studies at the moment on various different options for what could be produced from sugar or from cane. And I think what's critically important is that those have to pass a benchmark test. So essentially, they have to do better than export sugar. If they don't, then there's no value in investing in them. But where we are at the moment is we are in a process of a number of pre-feasibility studies. And I think that once those concepts have been proven, we would then be in a position where investment in the industry and investment in particular projects, for example, setting up a bioethanol plant or setting up a plastics plant, for example, would become probably very, very attractive. And certainly if you consider that all of this would be bio products, which is obviously the way the world is going, I would imagine that there will be a lot of opportunity for investment going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the facilities and, the regions that we grow sugar in, as you say, are some of the best parts from an agricultural perspective in South Africa and its ability to grow the sugar. So does this plan actually, does it facilitate South Africa as being a destination for investment into the sugar industry?
Certainly. I think what it does is that it spotlights the industry, and also because the industry is doing this with government as a collective, it means that there's sort of all the barriers that there might otherwise be through misunderstandings or misalignment in a way are taken away. So because you have this master plan process, it's very easy for the correct people to line up for a discussion on investment and facilitate that process in an efficient way.
Yeah, absolutely. And, South Africa is, as we say, an investor-friendly country. So I noted two things from your presentation. I just want to pick up on the both of them. The first one was in terms of your presentation, I was looking at one of the graphs, and it's quite interesting to see that the mix between local sales and export sales have increased over the years. You did mention that there was a move to stimulate local sales. But I think, instead of having one or the other, it might be good to have a growth in both of those sectors. So do you see a growth for exports in sugar?
I think that the growth for exports will always be limited by the world oversupply of sugar. So structurally, the world has too much sugar. And I think that that's what makes the world market for sugar a dumped market, essentially. So I think that most countries would really only want to be in a position where they were selling what they could in their local market. You'd always want to keep export capacity available, so that you were able to grow your local market and take advantage of things like preferential prices in the UK or the EU, as well as exchange rate, because obviously sometimes that is in our favor. But I think that most countries that grow sugar wouldn't necessarily be looking to grow their exports of sugar. They'd be looking to grow diversified products from sugarcane.
Exactly right. And that could then, lead to the increase in exports, as you say. The other thing that I noticed on one of your graphs is that, you had this black line showing the sort of number of producers. And, since 2010, that seemed to have declined, to the 2019-20 period. But if you look at the production of sugar, it's actually the same as in, so does that talk to the industry being more efficient and being, smarter in terms of the way it grows sugar?
It probably is a bit of a mixed answer, Roger, because in many cases, that reduction in terms of the number of growers will have been because small economic units couldn't survive. And so there was consolidation. So it's not necessarily only an increase in productivity of the individual growers. It may be that some growers, 3 growers collapsed into one, for example, or became cooperatives. And in some cases, perhaps for agriculture, that is positive. But I think that our concern really is as to how many economic units and how many families would have lost their economic livelihood because of losing their ability to grow sugarcane. And so our objective now is to make small-scale growers foundational in terms of the sugar industry, and particularly in terms of the master plan, to ensure that we don't lose small-scale growers and that those that we have are really able to contribute to their families in a meaningful way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you were saying earlier, growing the demand of sugar, not only for sugar, but for sort of, alternative sugar-based products or derived from sugar, might also just grow the bigger size of the pond, which will then stimulate the growth of these smaller growers. So Judith, thanks very much. It's been really, really exciting. We've run out of time, so I'm going to unfortunately need to move on. But I mean, I'm sure people can contact you directly. Your details are freely available. A quick Google search will give that. But we also are going to post this session, put up the details of all the speakers, so that people wanting to reach out and contact any of the speakers, you can feel free to do that. And we might come back to some Q&A with you a bit later, depending on the questions that are in the session. So once again, thanks very much, and I appreciate that.
Thank you, Roger.
Thanks. I'd like to now call upon our next speaker, Mr. Isak Breitenbach, who's the General Manager of the South African Poultry Association. Welcome, Isak. Are you there?
Thank you, moderator.
Great. I like the background that you're using. It's definitely all about chickens and poultry.
Absolutely.
You know, so we just finished with Judith talking around the sugar master plan. You know, so maybe that's a good place to kick off for us. You know, so what is the vision, and what is the vision of the poultry master plan?
The poultry industry actually forms part of a much larger value chain, namely the grain value chain. And that starts off with genetics into grain, obviously grain production, maize and soya, feed manufacturing, poultry production, obviously, and then extends into the retail trade. So this is an extensive value chain that Minister Didiza and Minister Patel felt should be grown. And the vision of this growth would be to increase the size of the local industry. Secondly, to create economic growth, to create jobs. It is a very big industry, employing in the region of 110,000 people in the extended value chain.
Okay, wow. So I mean that's quite a vision, and you know I think it's very much in line with a lot of the other sectors within the agri-business value chain that we're looking at. You know, which talks to growing the agricultural, using the resources and you know the assets that we have in South Africa, which include large amounts of people, you know, that can actively participate in these industries. You know, so when you develop this plan, is that what's the important considerations, you know, that you've been thinking of as you develop this plan?
I think that the very first consideration that had to be taken into effect is the fact that the industry must be a vehicle that can actually be expanded and can actually grow. This is a big industry. We are the second biggest industry in agriculture. I don't think it's well known that this industry is actually globally competitive. We produce the 6th lowest cost per kilo of chicken meat in the world. Although we are not such a big industry, we're actually relatively small compared to the US, Brazil, and countries like that. For the last 13 consecutive years, we outperformed the European Union on cost of production. So what we see here is we've got a vehicle that is sound, a vehicle that we can grow, a vehicle that's globally competitive. And those were considerations taken in deciding to develop a master plan or an industry growth plan.
Wow. I mean, you know, so some of the things you're talking about, low cost production, sound, good quality bird. I mean, all of those things seems like you could be gearing yourself up for even a larger piece of export.
Absolutely. We are currently exporting predominantly into sub-Saharan Africa. Part of our master plan is that we would like to become the second supplier to the local industry in the sub-Saharan African region. And when we talk a little bit further, we talk about the Middle East. We are currently exporting to the Middle East, but not great volumes yet. We also are targeting the European Union, and there are two products. The first product that we export would be cooked meat or partially cooked meat. That will be typically the product that goes to the higher LSMs or the higher income group. And that makes opened up export opportunities for us. I do understand the UAE market, having worked in that particular market. I think South Africa is well positioned in terms of costs to be competitive in that particular market. We've got a unique relationship with the Middle East in that we have a small bird market, which is odd in the world. All people in the world slaughter bigger birds. We slaughter small birds, similarly to what we experience in the UAE. And then most of South Africa's chicken is actually produced according to the halal guidelines. So in terms of all of those, we're already compliant, and exports are definitely on the radar for execution.
Wow. So, I mean, if I just stand back and listen to what you're saying, so where particularly would the opportunities for investment and partnerships in the industry lie?
I understand a little bit of the strategies of the Middle East. And the strategy in terms of food security in the Middle East is firstly, obviously, to locally produce, like all of us will try to do. Secondly, the Middle East will import product, and I've already talked about some of the benefits of importation from South Africa. But a third component and a very important component of the UAE strategy is also to invest in foreign countries and designate that particular product for the UAE. And there are, throughout the value chain, right from grain to chicken production, opportunities for investment in South Africa.
Of course, I mean, that sounds great. And in addition to that, obviously, just the opportunity to import bird or meat, that is priced well, that is safe, and, that could provide quite a large, buffer to food security, in the case of, as we've seen recently, COVID outbreaks and all types of phenomena. So I think that on the minds of people, of countries or companies that need to feed populations in this ever-changing world that we live in, makes a lot of sense, to look at alternative sources of supply. And certainly it sounds like the chicken industry in South Africa is one that one can look at. Just to change tack slightly, we heard the minister talk about it earlier, the shifting nature of consumer behaviors, particularly eating habits, being more healthy. We've heard that obesity is one of the largest killers in the world, particularly in some of the more, westernized countries. And, also consumers are demanding to have better visibility of products across the entire value chain, farm to fork, as they say. Quality and safety of chicken products, welfare of poultry, sustainable farming practices. I mean, the list goes on and on, right? And these are some of the questions that sort of the consumers are asking. So actually, how is the poultry industry in South Africa dealing with these challenges and managing these situations?
These demands are changing very, very fast. We've seen in the US, for example, that the brown meat, as we call it, the leg quarters or the drumsticks or thighs, were not preferred products. Currently, they're preferred products. And that is a major change in global patterns that we've seen. If we talk about the South African market more specifically, we see a movement from frozen product to fresh product. And that is when markets develop, that trend takes effect. Secondly, we are also seeing a movement from fresh product to cooked product or partially cooked product in the local market, but also destined for the export market. Together with that, customers are demanding, or consumers are demanding, more from us. They want absolute traceability. And in terms of the chicken production, our traceability extends right back into the feed mill. So if a portion of chicken is taken off a shelf, we can trace it back to the feed that was consumed by that particular bird. As you've mentioned, we also see a lot of changes in terms of demands for fair treatment of animals. And we take note of that. In terms of all of this, we are really positioning ourselves or following the example of the European Union. I believe in terms of social responsibility, production responsibility, food safety, traceability, they're probably the leaders in the world. And we emulate them. And that is what we do in terms of South Africa. I would like to say that our product is as safe as any product anywhere in the world, although we're probably a year or two or three behind entities like the European Union. You've mentioned also obesity and issues like that. Poultry is a unique animal protein. Poultry meat is very low in fat, which is obviously good for healthy eating. And therefore, we see this growth of poultry meat consumption. South Africa's poultry meat consumption is 38 kilograms per capita. That is incredibly high in world terms. And that is probably because we consume the whole carcass of the chicken. If we talk about a more important issue, the first go-to protein to stop malnutrition would be chicken meat. And that is really where the South African chicken industry plays its role in supplying the first go-to animal protein to the masses. and alleviating malnutrition in doing that.
Great. Wow. Thanks, Isak. That has been very, very insightful. I mean, it's clear to me, and I hope for people dialing into the session, that poultry is a very big industry in South Africa, very sophisticated, well run with, solid supply chains, and look forward to interacting with you a bit later during the Q&A session. So I think we've run out of time. So what I'd like to do is move on and then just talk to our next speaker. And I'd like to call on Ms. Fumelani Rachinga, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Fruit South Africa, to join us. Hi, Fumelani, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Roger. I just want to share my presentation.
Sure. So I think you're going to do a presentation first to give us an overview of Fruit South Africa. Then we're going to move on to take some questions. So thanks. Just see if your presentations are. So still.
Is it showing?
Not yet, Fumelani. There we go. If you can just put it on.
Is it still not showing?
Yes, it's showing now. If you can put it on presentation mode, that'll be great. So we can see it. Perfect. Great. Thanks. Off you go.
Okay. Good morning, Honorable Minister Didiza and all dignitaries attending this session this morning. And ladies and gentlemen, and thank you once more, Roger, for the introduction. So I will just talk about the South African fresh fruit industry. Okay, just a brief background on who Fruit South Africa is. This is our structure. We are an umbrella organization representing Berries South Africa, the Fresh Produce Exporters Forum of South Africa, HOTGROW. HOTGROW represents the palm and stone fruit industries, and the South African Subtropical Growers Association, who are responsible for the affairs of the Mango Growers Associations, the Lychee Growers Association, and the Avocado Growers Association. And then we also have the South African Table Grape Industry. And lastly, the Citrus Growers Association of Southern Africa. Southern Africa, because within the CGA, there are also growers from Zimbabwe and Swaziland. So this is just a structure of Fruit South Africa in terms of how we are organized. So Fruit South Africa is an umbrella body with those entities as members. So just to share with you our vision, we strive for a competitive, equitable, and sustainable South African fruit industry. Some of these elements will come out as I proceed with my presentation. Just some highlights in terms of our objectives as Fruit South Africa. The first objective is to establish Fruit South Africa as the collective platform for the South African fruit industry. Because here we recognize that there are many things that are cross-cutting in the respective member associations. So they are better dealt with or addressed collectively. So that's why we have this objective now. And the second objective is to engage constructively with government and other public institutions on policy, legislation, and other fruit industry matters. Of course, we recognize that we're not operating in an island, so this is very critical for us in terms of what we need to do to implement our mandate. So we also engage constructively with other strategic stakeholders, other than government and public institutions. And then the fourth objective is to promote and coordinate broad-based black economic empowerment, transformation, and skills development and training. As many of you may be aware, we know the history of South Africa. I think the presentation from the Sugar Association also highlighted that. So this objective is meant to improve inclusivity in the sector, so that those who were previously disadvantaged can also participate in the fruit value chain. And the fifth objective is to gather and disseminate key industry-related information. And lastly, to communicate industry information to broader public and industry stakeholders. So in terms of our work, I outlined the objectives of Fruit South Africa, but the main areas that we focus on as Fruit South Africa, in no order of importance here, there's transformation. I indicated that focus on transformation here, meant to bring in previously disadvantaged participants to the fruit industry value chain. So transformation is one of our priorities, and then we're also responsible for market access. So this is one of the areas that we focus on as Fruit South Africa. And you will see from my presentation why this is important for us. And then government relations as well. We really value this aspect of our focus areas, because we need government in what we do, and for the industry to thrive, we also need to support government in their programs. And lastly is information management and communication. Just some highlight in terms of the industry, in terms of its size and so forth. We currently have, these are figures of the 2020 season, 2019, 2020, and 2020, because some of the seasons overlap from one year to the next, and others are just based on one calendar year. So this is 2020 data. We have 197,000 hectares, which are under fruit production in South Africa. And from that, we produced just 5.1 million tons of fruit. Fruit in this instance, just to clarify, is fruit that are produced by the member associations of Fruit South Africa. Although I must highlight that the FPEF, the Fresh Produce Exporters Forum, does not only represent, or their membership is rather not only fruit growers, the fruit industry, but they also include other fresh produce commodities. And of the 5.1 million tons produced, we exported 64% of that total production, which is about 3.2 million tons. The export market is very critical for us, as you can see here. And then 11% went to the local market, and then 25% of that production was processed into different products. And then processing in this instance also includes drying. And then in terms of jobs, these are jobs directly on farms. They don't include jobs upstream and downstream the chain. These are just jobs on the farms by the different commodities that are represented under Fruit South Africa. We're looking at 276,647. So the dependents are actually over 1 million, from these people who were employed directly on the farms, and these are the full-time equivalent. And the industry is valued at more than 52 billion South African rand. And then just in terms of production, just to show the distribution in terms of the sizes of the different fruit types under Fruit South Africa, we can see citrus is the biggest commodity, followed by palm fruit, which will include apples and pears, and then table grapes will be the next one, and then stone fruit, and then avocado, and then mango, then berries, and then lychee. This is just to show the seasonality of our fresh fruit. Because of the climatic area in South Africa, we have different climates. Up more in the north, we have more the subtropical, and then we also have the spread right down by the coast in the Western Cape and so forth. So in any particular month in a year, there's one fruit or the other which is being produced. The presentation will be shared, so I won't go into the detail of this. So this just shows the distribution that we do have fruit throughout the year. And for details in terms of which fruit is available when, people can also refer to the presentation. So just, yeah. As I indicated, the bulk of our production is exported to different parts of the world. And then the biggest market for us is the EU and the UK combined. They take the bulk of the South African fruit exports, followed by Asia, and then the Middle East, and then the rest of Africa and North America. And there's also Russia that I skipped there, apologies for that. And there's also Far East somewhere on the right of my presentation. So to the UAE, we also export some fruit. We do have citrus that goes to the UAE, the table grapes, and then stone and palm. And then in total, in 2021, we exported just over 200 tons to the United Arab Emirates. And then this is more or less I'm almost done with my presentation. I thought it would be important for this forum for me to highlight the Fresh Produce Exporters Forum, which is a member of Fruit South Africa, as indicated earlier, for people who will be interested to export from South Africa. The Fresh Produce Exporters Forum is a voluntary non-profit organization and the official Fresh Produce Export Council in South Africa. So the membership of the FPEF includes of fresh produce exporters, producer exporters, export and marketing agents, pack houses, logistics, and other service providers. So their members are more than 140, and they account for about 90% of all fresh produce exported from South Africa. Fresh produce, including other fresh produce other than fruit. And it is also critical to note that there are strict accreditation criteria and a code of conduct to ensure only competent and reliable marketing agents and grower exporters are admitted to the forum. So people will have some sense of assurance in terms of credibility of those that will be dealing with if they are members of the FPEF. And in this regard, the FPEF also publishes an export directory annually where they list all their members, including their contact details, the kind of commodities that they're involved with, and the part of the chain that they participate in. So it is a critical piece of information to look at if you're interested in exporting from South Africa. And their website can also be found from the Fruit South Africa website. There's a link to them, to the FPEF. And there's also a clear, the navigation is clear to reach to access the export directory. And then just in conclusion, as you can see, the South African fruit industry is well organized. We saw there the different associations that I highlighted, and they all play an active role, in the support of producers and exports. Also indicated that the industry is export oriented. And by virtue of this, it also has a long history of exports. And it also, we can also guarantee, high quality produce. We also heard from Minister Didiza's keynote address, where she mentioned, for instance, the Perishable Products Export Control Board that certifies, among other things, quality of produce that gets exported from South Africa. So you'll be assured of the quality of products that you'll be sourcing if you source from South Africa. And in terms of exports, I indicated that currently, if I look at the 2020 figures, we exported about 3.2 million tons. So these exports are expected to reach 3.6 million tons by 2025. So what this signals is that we need to grow markets, and we also need to retain and optimize existing ones. So this is very key for us because we cannot absorb all the production in the country. So we're constantly looking for new markets, and then also cementing where we are already existing. So that is all in terms of my presentation. These are just our details for those who may be interested to contact us. Our website is www.fruitsa.co.za. And from that website, you can also find links of the different member associations and their contact details. Thank you.
Thanks, Phumolani. I think we've got questions, time for one or two questions. Very interesting presentation. And I think, follows on from the minister's comments, as well as Dr. Tempia's comments around the importance of the industry. And sort of the thing that stuck out with me on your last slide there is well organized. It's clear to me that the industry is well organized. The sector is connected properly. So I think from a, an investment point of view, investors always look for confidence when they invest in markets and they invest in sectors. So I've been asking the same question to everyone throughout the morning. So I'm going to open the questions with you and ask you the same question. So where do you see the opportunities and for partnerships and investment actually into the fruit industry in South Africa? You mentioned the surplus of fruit that we have, which is always a good problem to have. So obviously looking for new export markets, but where can people invest and partner in the industry? Okay,
thank you, Roger. Maybe just also mention that I see two areas. The first one being research on various aspects, research that is linked maybe to market access, as well as a research that seeks to find solutions rather for the ever-changing climate that we find ourselves in. Just also to bring to the attention of the forum, of the seminar, is that the two of our members, for instance, have dedicated companies that focus on research in their respective industries. There's research in the citrus industry, and then hot grow. There's also hot grow science. So they have two companies that specifically focus on research. So I think research is one area. And then another area that I see potential in partnerships or investment in is on infrastructure. This can be research infrastructure or just market access infrastructure as a whole. That's where I see some potential.
Thanks for that. And you speak about research and of course data being the commodity, and you mentioned climate change, and having the ability to have data and almost trying to have a crystal ball to predict climate changes across the globe, and which markets at any point in time will be open to exporting and importing, and how that will affect supply chains, etc., etc. So I think the world and the agricultural space is definitely becoming more and more complex, and research and data and insights, using things such as digital, I think are key to that. And on that note, as an exporter of fruit, what role can South Africa play as the export fruit industry to alleviate some of these challenges in markets where they might have disruptions?
Yeah, I think the industry itself, I'm looking more at the institutions that are service providers to growers. I think they can look for innovative solutions to challenges that growers are currently facing, and also, for instance, like we mentioned, the issue of climate change. And we can also look at the industry associations can also look at research in terms of alternatives to solutions to deal with pests. For instance, we know that there's a growing importance, or rather the growth in changes in maximum residue levels, for instance. So those are some of the things that industry associations and service providers can offer to alleviate some of the challenges that are coming through.
Yeah, absolutely. Innovation to increase yields, innovation to increase quality of product. You mentioned deal with pests. Having the ability to be responsive and adaptable, to supply quickly markets that are experiencing some form of disruption. So I think our fruit industry, given the well-structured and organized nature of it, is certainly positioned, to play its part, in the global supply of food, and particularly of fruit. And we spoke earlier, in the earlier sessions, of obesity and health and wellness. And I think fruit does play a key role in the diet of, a healthy nutritional diet, supplemented with protein, to create a healthy lifestyle. So as this world of the consumer moves on, and as the complexity of the climate change affects the production of that, I think the South African fruit industry is going to play a key role in solving some of those problems. So we've run out of time. So once again, thanks very much. Fumelani, I think it was a great presentation, and I was quite enjoyed by looking at the size and scale and the well-organized fruit business that we have in South Africa. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to move on to our next session, and we're going to change tack slightly And we're going to be talking to Bridget Backman, who's the Vice President of PepsiCo Sub-Saharan Africa, about the experience of Pepsi investing in South Africa. So welcome, Bridget. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Roger. And thank you, Ambassador and Minister Didiza, and then honorable guests, government delegates, fellow panelists. Thank you for hosting PepsiCo on this panel today. I will just have as a backdrop 2 slides, which I won't be presenting. Roger, if you can, I will share the deck now. But if you can just, we can go straight into some questions about, I assume you can see the screen now? We can. If you put it in presentation mode, yeah, perfect. Great. Yeah. Thanks, Bridget. Okay. Yeah, I mean, wow, what an investment into South Africa, right? So in 2020, just to bring everyone onto the same page, yeah, in 2020, PepsiCo made an investment or an acquisition of the Pioneer Foods Group through its South African subsidiary Simba. And if I'm not mistaken, Bridget, this was one of PepsiCo's largest acquisitions outside of the US, which is saying something, right? So actually, what was the rationale behind PepsiCo's decision to invest in the food industry in South Africa? Yes, thanks, Roger. Indeed, it was one of our largest acquisitions outside of the US. PepsiCo first entered South Africa in 1999, actually with the acquisition of Simba. And since then, our operations have really reflected a strong commitment to South Africa, its people, our communities, and to the South African economy. We've steadily expanded our portfolio of food and beverage brands. As you can see on the screen, it's quite a lot of well-known brands, from beverages to cereals, to dried fruit and raisins, to breads, rice, legumes, pasta, and then your snacks, and even some spreads in terms of Marmite. So we have steadily expanded, as I've said, these brands, supporting and investing in South Africa and its resources through mutually beneficial relationship with all of those in PepsiCo's value chain, both upstream and downstream. We're quite confident about the long-term future of South Africa and is committed to playing a constructive role, especially with government on our journey to reignite inclusive economic growth. We employ about 12,500 employees. We've committed to maintain employment levels for 5 years and to create additional 500 jobs during the same periods as economic conditions allow. One of the main attractions to PepsiCo in acquiring Pioneer was the high quality of talent and local know-how at all levels in the organization. And we committed to retaining the talented workforce to help enable our success. And we believe that the employees of both companies, so both Simba and Pioneer, have now got together to form PepsiCo Sub-Saharan Africa, will benefit from increased opportunities in a bigger global entity. If I may say so, in the Pioneer Food Group company, actually, we have found a like-minded company with a shared commitment to serving the people of South Africa by providing food and beverage products while driving inclusive growth for employees, our suppliers, consumers, customers, and the community at large. So we are really quite excited about our investment, and we look forward to further growth in South Africa and into Sub-Saharan Africa. Wow, Bridget, that's a great story, man. And I'm just looking at these wonderful brands that you had on the screen. You know, I mean, I relate to a lot of them, particularly Marmite, which we all grew up with, I think. You know, so you mentioned branding, and and PepsiCo does play a key role in manufacturing and providing sort of high quality food products and branded products and making them accessible to a wide range of customers and consumers. Do you see this acquisition that you've made as a base for further expansion and growth
in the brands, both within South Africa and into the wider sub-Saharan Africa?
Yes, definitely, Roger. Under the terms of the acquisition, we committed to invest at least 5.5 billion rand over 5 years in order to achieve our vision of a thriving business in South Africa, and most importantly, actually, an export center to the rest of Africa. So we see South Africa as a key agriculture hub in terms of our global value chain focus. And our investments will include a wide range from modernizing and increasing production capabilities, adding routes and distribution capabilities, investment in social initiatives. And I was very excited by the previous speaker talking about climate change and crops and new crops. So for us, that is quite important. Innovation in regenerative agriculture is what we look forward to. So sustainable agriculture.
Wow, and I mean, expanding products into other parts of Africa and the world, either through existing channels such as formal retailers who are present there, or alternatively new people that come and buy your products and experience your brands, in those markets for the first time. So, as a major global player, I mean, we're a year down the track, right? So how's it been going since that 1 year? And, in terms of your merger commitments and strategic plans, and I think also, your view on further investments or partnerships into the food industry in South Africa.
As they say, Roger, a journey starts with one step, right? Yeah. And sometimes you take 2 steps forward, 3 steps backward. So this has been a learning journey for us, being one of our biggest acquisitions, but we remain committed to our South Africa and sub-Saharan Africa journey and investment. The continent, I believe, has immense potential for further growth and development. We have a young demographic dividend to build on in terms of future-based skills. Most other economies are aging. And then, as the minister spoke about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, we really believe that the objectives of that agreement to create a single common market for goods and services, to reduce tariff and non-tariff barriers, to promote industrial development on the continent, as well as sustainable and inclusive socioeconomic growth, are good precursors to support inclusive agriculture value chains across business, supportive and supported by harmonized policy environments. With the African Continental Free Trade Agreement in effect, we hope to see more strengthened and resilient supply chains. Such supply chains will definitely enhance productivity across the continent and is critical for business stakeholders and governments to continue to work together on the promotion of regional integration. And we think South Africa is ideally poised and positioned to focus on this. Just as a reminder, and I think our first speaker spoke about South Africa's agriculture sector, but I just wanted to note that our sector is export-oriented, with roughly 49% of the agriculture export products in value terms being exported. And the South African agriculture economy has more than doubled in volume and production since 1994. So overall, it's important to mention that we are a growing industry with a great potential for growth in South Africa from primary level to agro-processing. And in addition, we have underutilized land, which is crucial for our development. And then we spoke briefly, one of the speakers spoke briefly about the agriculture and agro-processing master plan, which is a social compact to a development approach between business, government, and labor. I think that's an excellent PPP to drive and foster inclusive growth and aligns with the NDP of the South African government. What we have to remember, though, is that there are preconditions to reach these dreams of ours in this country. We need a stable and conducive policy and investment environment. We need comprehensive, sufficient and predictable infrastructure and services. We need comprehensive and effective farmer support programs. We have more smallholder farmers in number than we have big commercial farmers. And just imagine if we could only scale 10% of them to double their size, we would be a force to reckon with as a country. So even though we do have some infrastructure challenges, I feel investors can still find value in RSA agriculture and the food industry. But what I wanted to touch on, because that is my view, that this is like an absolute growth pivot point for us as a country and for investors, given that we've doubled in growth since 1994. But what I also wanted to reflect on is on organizations who wish to invest here and the public interest commitments in terms of our Competition Act post a merger or acquisition. So I just wanted to share some of our thoughts and our journey on our public interest commitments. So we're honored to have these commitments because they're part of our merger conditions. So the first part is that we've pledged, and I just want to move my slide, if it will let me do that. There we go. So we have pledged the Basumi Workers Trust an employee share ownership plan in terms of Black economic empowerment. And some of the speakers were referring to the need for broad-based Black economic empowerment, not only in the country, but specifically in agriculture. And this ownership plan, which is unencumbered, so that means that our workers will have rights and will have dividends and will have cash flow in hand as soon as everything is finalized, which is within the next 2 to 3 months. But this was a 1.655 billion employee share ownership scheme, which is real and guaranteed value rather than a notional paper exercise value. Then the second part of our public interest commitment is a development fund, which as part of the acquisition of Pioneer Foods, we agreed to, and it's around driving equitable growth in agriculture. So it's a 600 million Rand, which is about $40 million fund called the Didiza Fund. And it's aligned to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. We've mapped our SDGs as a country, and now we've mapped it for PepsiCo, and then also aligned to the 2030 NDP. So the fund will actually allocate 300 million to agriculture development to assist small emerging Black farmers to upscale capabilities and to ensure that they're provided with opportunities to integrate into the value chain. 200 million will be for supporting education to enable initiatives that provide training, upskilling, whether it is in terms of 4IR, on AI, sustainable agriculture, and we've already implemented. So we have about 40 young people in our organization at the moment on a graduate training program. So, you know, that time post-university, George, where everyone, Roger, where everyone says you need experience. We are providing experience straight out of university or Technicon students, and then a future leader programs for those with 3 to 5 years experience to enter the workplace. And then 100 million, very importantly, we spoke about innovation in agriculture, to SMEs to provide incubation and technology support in terms of agriculture, innovation, and sustainability. So that's our real journey to date, and it's quite an exciting journey we've been on.
I mean, wow, what an investment and commitment, not only to bringing us the best and most loved food brands, but also to the economy, the industry, and you mentioned the word young dividend. You know, the young dividend in terms of the Smart Brains Trust, and firstly, they make a great consumer market, so they consume some of the products you make. But just your talk around fourth industrial revolution, innovation, very, very critical in terms of the growth of the industry. So Bridget, we've run out of time. I want to just thank you so much for a great presentation. It is really exciting to see a company of the stature of PepsiCo investing in South Africa, and also being committed to the growth and development of the industry and the young dividend and peoples of South Africa. So thanks very much for that.
Thank you, Roger.
Great, thanks, man. I'd like to call upon our last speaker, Ms. Matlo Satati, who's the executive of the Food Safety Initiative at the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa, to discuss some food safety, food quality, and food waste discussions. Matlo, thanks for joining us. You're there.
Thank you so much, Roger, and good afternoon. Is it afternoon? Still morning to the honorable ministers and the delegates that are here, and all protocol observed. Thank you.
Thanks, Matlo. I like your background. It's very clear, and which organization you sort of are working with. Tell us a bit about the Consumer Goods Council and the work you're actually doing in the food sector.
Thank you so much. I think first and foremost, we must say that South Africa has got an abundance, and as you have already seen from my colleagues in the association space, a number of industry associations that are fully supporting the sector in terms of making sure that whatever challenges that they may be faced with, they work with. And what is critical for that is the collaborative efforts that come with being a member of an association. And the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa is one of the association. We work across all parts of the value chain, in that we have got a retail membership, we've got the producers, we welcome anyone, we've got laboratories as part of our member base. And as you can imagine, the space that we play in, there's a number of contributions in the GDP of all our members, and proudly to say that companies like your PepsiCo are part of our member base, and they sit on our board in order to drive what the sector can do for the benefit of the nation at large. So in essence, we do focus on a number of things, be it transformation, be it training. We do run workshops in terms of ensuring that members know what is critical for them to work on. And we work with the crime sector, in that the police are part of our critical stakeholders. We've got a focus on the crime and risk initiative, and I'm sitting in the food safety initiative, where we deal with health, wellness, nutrition, and food-related aspects of the sector. So it's a holistic view that we have adopted as the CGCSA. And another critical aspect is that we hold the license to issue out GS1 barcodes, which we call the global language of business. And we work with various member organizations of the GS1 across the globe. Over to you, Program Director, or have we lost George?
You are still online.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Jadine. I think are you taking over, or I can just proceed?
Are you done with your presentation?
There are several questions that have been posed through to my side. I was led by the program director. I think we have lost him, so I can proceed if that is in order.
Yes, he did indicate he may have some challenges. Ma'am, you can proceed and respond with those questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So basically, as we continue there, I think since we have got the government representation here, of critical and utmost importance for South Africa is that we do, as my colleagues have already said, we do get the necessary support from government. And of critical importance is our participation with the Business Unity of South Africa, and also sitting at NETLEC, which includes negotiations, which include your business community, labor, and government. So those are the things that guide us in terms of ensuring that we get the critical national imperatives answered as the sector and the public organization. And the second question that I had to respond on to is the issue of transparency and how we enhance the value chain in terms of getting them into sustainability. And from where we view transparency, really, the journey begins with compliance alignment in terms of global trade, because we are a member of the WTO, and we take that as a very critical essence of the work that we do in that, first and foremost, if our members comply and if they work hard at it, and we are comfortable that they do that, then they can break through the ceilings in terms of the export market. And we will rest assured that the sector, whenever we avail products into the export markets, we can rest assured that South Africa's products will be there. And in terms of your legal and regulatory, the labeling, and one speaker has spoken to it, in terms of your communication, your transparency really starts with the product that you put, the communication that you put on the label actually indicates exactly what you need to communicate. And I know there's sometimes a little bit of challenges. That's why we are looking forward to the continental free trade, in terms of how we will align ourselves as Africa, so that when we take products into the rest of the markets, how we will collectively be communicating. In most instances, you'd find that members have got challenges where the space which is limited on a label has to be written in French or has to be written in a suitable language for that market. But we do value the recognition in terms of the WTO and trade alliances that we have, in that in most cases, they do try to accommodate all of those markets. And I remember, Roger, you've spoken to the issue of nutrition, where we had an issue where another area of the market wanted to fortify salt, which salt is not a vehicle nutritionally in sense of South Africa. But we had to respect the other country in terms of the measures that they've put in place and the choices that they've done to go that way. So I think being in alignment with the WTO and with the other rules that govern global trade has really helped us. And as I've already spoken to, the GS1 standards that we have aligned with, in terms of your track and trace, in terms of identification, those enhance how we need to leverage on the technology that we can have. Because a barcode, in most cases, we take it as the beep at a retail store or when you have your ID. But it basically serves a whole lot in terms of us being sure that whatever that the track and trace that we've done locally, when the enforcement agencies in the export markets, they can truly and uniquely identify a product as and when it gets to the other market. And this helps us, especially in terms of when we have to do a recall, we would know what are the connecting linkages locally and elsewhere where our products have gone. And welcome back, Program Director. I am on question 3. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Matla. I mean, it's really interesting to listen to you. Sorry, my apologies. I had to switch laptops for a technical challenge, but back online. Yeah, so it's been present throughout every discussion we've had today. This concept of food safety, security, traceability by consumers. We are moving into a world where people think very carefully about what they wear, what they put in their mouths, how they behave, where the food is procured from, etc. So having standards and sort of traceability of products, I think is quite critical in terms of keeping the system, if I can say that, intact. You've got a wide number of members. I'm not sure if you did cover that or not in the Consumer Goods Council, ranging from food manufacturers right through to producers. The role that CGSA plays, I think, in this environment, in not only promoting connectivity, but also allowing members to share their experiences and collaborate, particularly in areas of food safety, I think is a key thing that you focus on, right?
Perfect. Yeah, correctly so. Because as we bring it into today, there's a whole lot of investment that goes in maintaining the quality and the food safety aspects of it. And as we know, non-compliances really cost up to the tune of $7 billion annually. So for us to ensure that we are all on the same page, we follow the trends, we work closely with the regulators, we have to collaboratively do things together, because things move. And I guess the risks that are facing the sector, and we can't drop the ball in terms of that. But we sit quite comfortably that the sector has grown in terms of knowing how to collaborate together and openly share best practices. And we've seen this with the dialogues that we've had in full support from the DTIC, who's our key stakeholder, and the Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries, in that when we had to uncover the issue pertaining to food waste, because it ties in closely, it's sitting in the center of food safety and food quality. If food products do not comply, where do they then go? They become food waste. So in terms of uncovering all of those things, we saw value in sitting together around the table with the various stakeholders to come up with innovative solutions on how we can mitigate those.
Yeah, and I would imagine, I mean, given the nature of what we're talking about here, the use of technology and innovation, to assist with the traceability along the value chains is quite key, right?
Correct. Basically, so there is no better truth. The sooner, I think that's another improvement that we could propose to South Africa, is to embark closely on this technological transformation, so that we can track and trace, and we know issues pertaining to your food fraud, illicit, counterfeit. If we are collectively talking together and we can uniquely identify the role players in the space, and that gives us the assurance also with our partners globally in terms of getting those markets. I know the EU is very critical on track and trace. If we know exactly who are the people that are playing in the space, we can solidify and close the loopholes in terms of your food fraud, illicit and counterfeit.
Sure. I mean, I've been asking sort of all of the participants this morning, the speakers, around this question of where do they see growth and opportunity. And it strikes me that, investment in the technology side and the 4IR, in the track and traceability throughout the system, makes sense to me.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I want to loop in the issue of the role of the SMMEs and smallholders, because I think we've got, like one speaker has said, we've got a lot of those in the country. And also in order to feed and feed into the export market, in as much as the import market is feeding South Africa, there has to be a balance, but we need to be prepared. Let's take, for instance, the poultry sector. There's huge opportunities there, as Isaac has already alluded to, in that if we support our smallholders and our SMMEs, already they're giving a number of employment opportunities for the country. And if we work together in supporting them, because we all know that the cost of compliance is quite high. For you to maintain all of the systems, your quality, your sustainability, your food safety is quite critical. So if we work together, either collaborative, like you've seen the investments from your manufacturers like your PepsiCo, and we take the SMMEs and we groom them to become more of the food system and increase the food production. In any way, this will in itself factor into the food security aspects locally, in as much as it's doing in the export market.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as Bridget was saying, taking advantage of that youth dividend and, educating them in terms of, food safety and how to actually take the industry to the next level. So, Matlu, we've run out of time. So I just wanted to thank you so much for your presentation. I'm sure it went well for the pieces I did not hear, but a very interesting and very relevant topic, which is, I think, why we chose to end on this. No matter what we do across the industry, and no matter how we, how we grow our industries, food safety, the criticality of processes, of controls, of track and traceability, particularly as we export into other markets, is going to become more and more critical, because the consumers in those markets demand these very things from us. And I think, so the role that you play from the Consumer Goods Council in supporting your members and driving this agenda is really appreciated. So thanks very much for that. So I think that brings us to the end of our presentation. Jardine, have we recorded any questions up on the board during the session at all?
George, I will share the screen and go live to the virtual auditorium, and let's have a look at some of the reactions from the global participants.
Great.
There's a bit of a slight delay. There's a comment that the UAE is a very well developed re-export hub into the Middle East region, which in itself is a huge opportunity for South African exporters to this region. There is a comment from Japan. Hi, everyone. Konnichiwa from Japan. Greenland, vertical tech farm leader. Look forward to listening and learning more. We have some greetings from South African entrepreneurs who are on this session. I'll skip those comments.
What strikes me, Jardine, as you're going through these comments is the wide reach of the audience across the globe. You know,
absolutely,
from east to west, which is really, I think, great. You know, great for South Africa and also great for the industry and the participants.
Yes, and we've got our officials at the Consulate General in New York online as well. So those are broadly just the two comments. Before I hand back to you to allow the panelists to respond, just for the participants online, there is a button called Resources on the top right of your screen. If you click on those buttons, on that button, you will access all the presentations delivered today. There was a third presentation. It will be up shortly. Roger, I hand back to you, and then we can hand back to Brian to officially close the session today. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jardine. Once again, I'd really like to thank, firstly the Minister and the Ambassador for making the time to join us in the session this morning. I think both of their sort of addresses to us, was quite exciting in that, we can clearly see the opportunity for the agri-industry, which remains a cornerstone of the South African industry. And then I'd also like to thank the speakers who joined us today, from setting out what the agricultural industry looks like, right through to covering, the fruit and poultry sector, through to looking at an investment in South Africa, right through to looking at food safety and security. So really, thank you for all of your time and effort. I know it takes a lot to take a morning out of your day to prepare and share information with us. As you can see from the comments, I think participants found it very valuable. And Brian, with that, I'd like to hand over to you to formally close this session this morning. And sorry, Brian, before I hand over to you, how remiss of me not to thank the DTIC for its great effort in promoting South Africa and the agricultural business industry in the UAE, and for setting up this whole operation and setting up our stands and the Virtual Connect. So thank you once again. I think it's a great initiative from your side. So with that, over to you. I assume that you are on. Otherwise, participants, I think I'm happy to close the session on behalf of the DTIC. Thank you for joining us this morning. As I said, we hope you found it really valuable, and look forward to interacting with you in the future. Contacts for the speakers will be available on the site as well. So please feel free to reach out, and have a great rest of the week at the Expo. Thank you.